By saying that race is socially constructed, then, we mean that race only means something because of the meanings that society has placed upon it.
Oh, so we could give it meanings that we, like whatever meaning we want? Like it doesn't matter, maybe? Like we should judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin?
Oh my God.
Wouldn't that be a
I
great...
swear someone said that. I swear some famous person sometime.
I know.
Look, I'm not very like history. I don't know books. You know, someone said that, Adam.
We should give them a national holiday because that would be a great social construction.
That would be a great social construction. Yes.
What race is assumed to mean has thus changed and continues to change over time and across geography. In ancient times, for instance, Paul C. Taylor writes that, while the world was for many of its inhabitants a world of multiple peoples, often enough these people were sorted into two sets, us and them. Groups of people certainly saw themselves as distinct.
Okay.
Yeah, us and them. Obviously.
Okay. All right.
From one another, yet the concept of race as it exists in the present day would have been simply incomprehensible to them. Our modern understanding of race is primarily a consequence of colonialism. As I explore at greater length in my video on colonialism itself, European nations who were discovering new lands needed a rationale for exploiting the resources and the people that they encountered there. They therefore drew upon cultural differences between themselves and those living in the places they...
It's just really funny because it's like, you think if you know, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Portuguese Empire, any of these fucking empires, you think if they sailed to some yet unknown island of white people, you think they're going to suddenly not subjugate them and abuse them and take advantage of them?
I'm laughing at that they needed a rationale. Have you read any history? They didn't need a fucking rationale. They were like, guess what? We're here to rule things.
The rationale was
line.
we have guns and Jesus.
Yeah, you guys got jack shit. Take us to your gold.
had discovered in order to argue that they were not simply invading.
And also, this concept doesn't even make sense, because if race was constructed purely out of colonialism, then wouldn't all of the white European empires viewed themselves as a unified white empire instead of all being in constant competition and war with each other, like all the time?
Yes. You know, why did the Spanish and the English were in competition? The English landed at Plymouth Rock. The Spanish ended up in South America. That's why everyone in South America speaks Spanish.
Right, and that's why we had to buy, or Thomas Jefferson had to buy, like the western part of the U.S. from the French.
The French ended up in Canada, right? That's why they speak French Canadian.
That's in Quebec, yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Why didn't they all just team up? All this whiteness.
And or pillaging, but were instead bringing civilization to uncivilized peoples. This went even further when it came to European...
Dude, I don't know that the French, English, and Spanish all had that same justification, though, because were the Spanish conquistadors bringing religion? Maybe they were, and I'm spacing on my history.
It's weird because it's sort of like he's kind of conflating a bunch of different concepts together. Mm-hmm. I don't think in that time period, in the 1716 and 1500s, like they weren't thinking about bringing civilization to these people. They were thinking like, I just want this land.
The gold. Really, all they wanted was the gold. They were like,
yeah, they wanted gold. They wanted land. They wanted the access to the kind of crops you can make in the area, tobacco, spices, etc. They wanted trading routes. They weren't really like, he's kind of conflating this with later periods of time where you had like the Christian preachers go out and they kind of tried to preach their religion to native groups, and kind of conflating this to like later American ideas of like, we have to bring freedom and democracy to everyone.
Yeah. He's not really talking specifics. My understanding of the history is that English, French, and Spanish were all in competition. The Spanish conquistadors came over, and in South America, they already had hierarchically ordered civilizations where they had already agriculture. They had basically a ruling elite. 90% of the people lived in squalor. So it was very easy for the Spanish conquistadors to get the guys who were in charge, the elites, into a room, chop all their heads off, and then come out of the room and say, hey, we're your new elites. Like all the structures were already there. All the institutions were already built.
Well, that's for the Aztecs, at least.
For the Aztecs, yes, exactly. That's why South America was so easy to colonize. Now, the English came over expecting to do the same exact thing, but they discovered the Native Americans. Which one is it I'm allowed to say? Is it Native American?
You can say Native American or Indian.
Okay. The Native Americans were a bunch of warring tribes. They didn't have any. They weren't agriculturally based. They didn't have any. I mean, obviously, every tribe had some elite involved, but they didn't have an elite that was in charge of thousands of people. So the English didn't have the same option, let's call it, as the Spanish did, and because of this. Like when the English came over, they planned on living off the land, as in chopping the heads off the elites and taking over the structures. They didn't realize, oh shit, we really have to live off the land here because there's no society for us to take over. They were dying. Like the English colonies were dying out. There were some tough years where like half their people died from starvation and shit. So
yeah,
it was a tough go, and that's actually how capitalism took hold in America, because we had to actually give people incentives to work instead of just saying work.
Right. I don't think any people that were involved in the slave trade thought they were bringing civilization to the slave.
The slaves, the original colonies that were landed at Plymouth Rock. They did bring slaves with them.
No, I don't know when they started to bring.
Yeah, slavery started coming after they started farming and stuff like that. After they started building the civilization,
first, right?
Yeah. But I'm curious because the way this guy tells it, it's like day one they brought slaves with them. No, they didn't.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and didn't they? I don't know the history of slavery. Maybe I should learn it better. But the slaves were basically offered to them. They were like, okay, I'll buy some. It wasn't like they developed the slaving industry.
Yeah, I don't know the exact how they decided to come to slavery. I don't know the exact history of that.
Yes.
Nations enslaving people from the African continent. Many of those engaged in slavery believed themselves to be good Christians, and it wouldn't have been very Christian to kidnap and force one's peers into bondage. So again, culture.
Yeah, Jesus doesn't approve. But Jesus Go ahead.
What did Jesus?
Jesus ran the Underground Railroad. Jesus freed the slaves.
True. Well, I was going to say the human's capacity to rationalize anything is quite astounding.
It's scary. It is scary.
I know.
This is why you got to have culture rein people in.
Yep.
Cultural differences were drawn upon to categorize those that they were turning into property and subjecting to a life of brutality as in some way less than human. It was slightly later, during the Enlightenment, that clear taxonomies of race began to emerge. Angela Saini writes that what Europeans saw as cultural shortcomings in other populations in the early 19th century soon became conflated with how they looked. So-called race scientists thus began drawing on both cultural and physical differences between groups of people in order to argue that the human race might in fact be made up of multiple races. Saini points to German doctor Johann Friedrich Blumenbach's 1795 treatise on the...
All this is just basically filler, right? We're in agreement there?
Yeah, I assume what he's saying is true.
Well, it's filler because what does this have to do with his argument? Like, why are we talking about this tired old shit?
I guess I don't know. He's spending so much time on the whole idea that, like, where the concept of race came from.
Yeah.
Right. So he's going to make the argument that race was constructed primarily in order to oppress people, which maybe it was. I think that might be true. But it's like, okay, well, so let's abolish the idea of race. Like that's what that's why
exactly.
it's so bizarre. It's like, yeah, okay, if white Europeans created the concept of race in order to oppress other people in the world, so let's just do away with the concept. Like,
Yeah, let's
we're
get
in
rid of the
agreement.
concept of race. Put it in the
Yeah.
trebuchet. Throw it at the moon.
Variety of mankind as a key text in this process. Blumenbach posited that humanity could, in fact, be divided into 5 discrete racial groups: Caucasians, Mongolians, Ethiopians, Americans, and Malays. Note
How
I wouldn't want to be a Malays person.
how much worse would like wars and racism be if if evolution separated those populations long enough that they couldn't even interbreed with one another?
Oh my god.
Like,
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because that actually happened. It just happened before modern history could record it. I mean,
not necessarily, because I've heard that the Neanderthals could interbreed with.
well, that's true. We could. That's true.
Yeah.
We could, but we were far more genetically different from Neanderthals, and I forget. There's a bunch of other human
Yeah,
subspecies.
Homo sapien.
The,
It's Homo sapien
Yeah.
and Neanderthal.
right, but there was or Cro-Magnon or what, I don't remember the terms, but there's
Right.
there's 4 or 5 at the time period.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like-
yeah. You're right.
Yeah, and we were like just murdering the shit out of each other. So.
Yeah, we hunted them down to extinction. That
Yeah,
was
they
like
think-
the
they
first
think-
genocide.
Right. Well, that's what's kind of funny about this, is because you wonder, like, if there's probably some massive, subspecies race war that happened on Earth, where Homo sapiens or Cro-Magnon or whatever we were just wiped out all the other humans, and we don't really think about it or talk about it anymore.
Yeah, we probably should.
Blumenbach
Probably not worth talking.
Well, no, you're right, but it would. It's an interesting thing, but it's not really
Yeah,
did well on it. But it shows you how this concept of the tribalism to destroy the other is so ingrained in our biology, unfortunately.
territory. It's all about
Yes.
territory.
Blumenbach did not use the term Caucasian in its geographical sense to refer to those living in the Caucasus region between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, but instead to refer to pretty much everyone from Europe, India, and North Africa. He stated that he did so because its neighbourhood, and especially its southern slope, produces the most beautiful race of men. This
Why are you laughing at that? What's the matter? He pulled that
Just think
quote.
it's
He's like,
funny.
let me pull the most incendiary quote I can find.
Well,
This'll
yeah, I mean, assuming
trigger
you're
'em."
going back to what is this, 1700s fake race science. You're
Yeah.
gonna find the guy who's gonna be, obviously everyone involved is gonna be super racist.
Yeah, news alert. 200 years ago, they were racist as fuck. Guys, did you know? Did you know that?
It's so funny because a lot of times they use this as an excuse to be like, this is the problem with white Western European empiricism in science. Because look at what it produced. And it's like, okay, but you realize that it was also science that debunked all this shit.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It was science that weeded all this stuff out and flushed
Yes.
it down the toilet.
It was science that said we're 99.99999% the same.
Right.
Okay, it wasn't some Grievous study asshole.
You know how
who's
I
doing
know?
critical race theory that discovered that.
You know how I know that Sitch and I are both African Americans? 'Cause science.
Because science.
This was not only a categorization of humans into racial groups then, but the articulation of a racial hierarchy, with white people placed firmly at the top. Our everyday understanding
He's like, it's so funny. It's so funny. Because he knows he's pressing people's buttons. But he's like, I'm just going to do it all serious. I'm going to do it totally in this flat tone. But at the same time, I know, he's like, this will kick him in the nuts.
Well, it's so funny because it's like that weird subject matter, the weird topic where when people were operating with no science and just purely on racism, it's like, oh, well, we put the white people at the top. But then when they start creating IQ tests, suddenly it's
I know. They're like, oh shit, the Asians are at the top.
yeah, it's like, whoops, kind of fucked ourselves up there, guys. So, but that's also somehow racist because of white people. So I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, exactly.